and most faithful successors of Sun's revolutionary undertakings.
以和平方式实现祖国统一。
National reunification by peaceful means best serves the interests of the Chinese nation as a whole, including our compatriots in Taiwan. We will adhere to the basic policies of peaceful reunification and one country, two systems, uphold the One China principle and the 1992 consensus, and work for the peaceful development of cross-strait relations. Compatriots on both sides of the Taiwan Strait should stand on the right side of history and join hands to achieve China's complete reunification and the rejuvenation of the Chinese nation.
This year not only marks the 100th anniversary of the Communist Party of China, but also the 110th anniversary of the Revolution of 1911. President Xi Jinping is calling on the Chinese people to learn from revolutionaries' noble patriotism and devotion to the motherland, and carry on the pursuit of the great rejuvenation of the Chinese nation. Su Yuting, CGTN, Beijing.
The revolution began with the Wuchang uprising in today's Wuhan in Hubei province. It was one of the many uprisings against the Qing dynasty since the mid-1800s. Diverse groups joined in southern China against imperialism, Biran reports.
Shortly after the Wuchang uprising in today's Wuhan, capital city of Hubei province, 15 other Chinese provinces declared themselves independent within a span of weeks. The abdication of China's last emperor on February the 12th, 1912, brought to an end over 2,000 years of the imperial rule.
11 Revolution ended the autocratic rule that lasted for thousands of years in ancient China. It was the first radical change for China in the 20th century. The revolution had a profound influence on the country, lasting up to today. It laid the foundation for the following revolutions, politically and philosophically.
Chinese historians call the Wuchang uprising the start of a new era. It spread the concepts of democracy and republicanism, pushing towards the reformation of Chinese modern society.
There was no way for Chinese people to accept the restoration of the emperor after the revolution, as democratic concepts were widely spread. The ideas of national independence, national prosperity, patriotism, and national reunification are a very important legacy of the 1911 revolution.
In Wuhan, many historical sites have been preserved to remember this important chapter in China's history. Exhibitions of Xinhai Revolution relics, calligraphy, and paintings are on display around the city to mark the day. Online seminars are also being held in China and abroad to mark the anniversary. Biran, CGTN, Wuhan.
Sun Yat-sen is a revered revolutionary leader in China who played a pivotal role in ending the country's imperial rule. CGTN's Gao An visited the Shanghai Museum of Sun Yat-sen's former residence to find out more.
Revolution, democracy, and patriotism. These are among the keywords leading the life of Sun Yat-sen. Born in Guangdong province in 1866, Sun started his career as a doctor in Macau and Guangzhou.
During his practice, Sun realized that medical techniques can only heal people's physical pain, but cannot awaken their soul. So he began to work on a more important thing, that is to save the country.
Sun then established revolutionary organizations like the Tongmenghui, the aim to promote nationalism, democracy, and people's livelihood. In 1911, Sun led the Xinhai Revolution, putting an end to the Chinese monarchy of more than 2,000 years old.
Over his long career as a revolutionary, Sun sketched out many plans for how a government should develop its economy, from ports, railways, to industry.
Besides political activities, Sun also developed plans to promote more than 30 industries, such as mining, agriculture, and transportation. Sun faced many challenges in the early 1920s, but he eventually joined hands with the Communist Party of China to help the country prosper.
Now, Dr. Sun's industrial plan has not only been realized, but it has far exceeded his original vision. As President Xi said, what can comfort Dr. Sun today is that we're closer to achieve the goal of national rejuvenation than ever before.
The revolution has not yet been successful, and comrades still need to strive for it. Sun's famous quote has encouraged generations to carry forward the revolution. And even today, people remember his patriotism and devotion to the motherland. 高昂 CGTN 上海。
Let me get you more analysis on this. My guest today, Wang Xinsu, Associate Professor at the School of Social Development and Public Policy at Beijing Normal University. Professor Wang, fantastic to have you on our program today. The fact that China is commemorating this anniversary says it all. China considers the revolution of 1911 as a pivotal moment in its history. Help us understand the significance here and what legacy did pioneers like Sun Yat-sen leave behind?
Well, I think the revolution of 1911 is one of the greatest in human history. And if you think about the Chinese political history, China had an imperial system that lasted for over 2,000 years. To be sure, we had many dynasties, but they came and they went, and the same system persisted. But it was the Great Revolution in 1911 that finally ended the entire feudal and imperial system, and it ushered in a republican system, one of the first in Asia. So from that perspective, the revolution of 1911 is really unprecedented in the Chinese history. And China also faced very severe domestic and external situations when the revolution happened. For example, domestically, the Qing court faced a lot of rebellions, and the capability of the bureaucracy was very weak, and the society was in severe economic problems. Externally, China was cut into pieces, and many territories were taken over by foreign powers. So the Qing court was not able to resist against these domestic and foreign pressure, and revolution was needed. So it was at this time the revolution took place and led by Dr. Sun Yat-sen and his allies and his movements. And what was also important was that a new republican system was established, the first time in Chinese political history. And intellectually, I think the revolution also ushered in a new period when the Chinese citizens were able to think of themselves as different from what they were before. And before, they were very proud of the Chinese civilization, and it featured strong family and clan values. But now, under the leadership of Sun Yat-sen and his allies, and a new concept was introduced to China, that was national identity and nationalism. And so finally, the Chinese people would surround around a country, a national identity called the Chinese nation. So that's very important, and that left a very strong legacy to the Communist Revolution and the national rejuvenation we are now embarking on in the decades to come.
The revolution was a turning point, no doubt, although it fell short of dismantling the Chinese society, which we called semi-feudal and semi-colonial at the time. Professor, when you reflect back on that part of history, what were some of the shortcomings of the revolution of 1911?
Well, I guess the China had accumulated so many problems over 2,000 years of time, and especially in the final decades of Qing rule, China faced a lot of domestic and foreign challenges, like I just said earlier. So I wouldn't expect one revolution to change everything, despite the fact that the revolution had a very long-term goal of calling for justice, calling for self-determination, and so forth. However, China was still dominated by the traditional and native rulers and warlords, and the Revolutionary Army was very innovative, but relatively speaking, they were militarily weaker than the dominant social classes. So it took more strategies and more reforms and longer time for China to really track on a social transformation and political transformation. So from that perspective, I think the revolution fell short of really delivering what it was supposed to do. For example, justice, equality, prosperity, and so on and so forth. But that really set up a new chapter for the other revolutionaries in the decades to come to follow Sun Yat-sen's cause, to continue the revolution and to continue to deliver what the revolution was calling for.
Professor Wang, I think it's very interesting when you said that the Chinese, after the revolution of 1911, were able to wake up to this national identity. The idea of nationalism was very new to the Chinese people. And then something the ensuing Chinese communists and those pioneering revolutionaries had in common was they wanted to build on that national community, and they had a vision for national rejuvenation. Right. How did the revolution pave the way for Chinese communists, which came later than the revolution, to really carry forward the torch for national rejuvenation?
Well, Dr. Sun Yat-sen had very strong opinions and ideas about where China was going. For example, he famously introduced the 3 principles of the people, including nationalism, people's rights, and people's livelihoods. Unfortunately, he was not able to carry forward what he was hoping for due to many factors. But what was fortunate was that, under his coordination, political parties were built and constructed to carry forward what he was unable to finish in terms of the causes of achieving social justice and kicking out the foreign bully and so forth. So the Communist Party was founded 10 years after the revolution of 1911, and the Communist Party of China was calling for the same causes of social justice, international justice, equality, and so on and so forth. Also, the Communist Party introduced Marxism-Leninism from Russia and incorporated that with the Chinese reality. And so that the party was able to establish a new ideology that has been guiding the Chinese development and rejuvenation. So from that perspective, I think the Communist Party of China carried forward the unfinished cause of Dr. Sun Yat-sen's revolution and opened up a new chapter for Chinese development and rejuvenation.
Professor, I do want to end our conversation on the issue of Taiwan. Sun Yat-sen once said, unification is the hope of all Chinese people. Now, more than 100 years later, how do you see the goal of complete unification? President Xi talked about that in his speech today also. How do you see that goal play out 100 years later?
Well, I think the Taiwan issue, if you ask the Chinese, Taiwan issue is one of the scars left on the minds of the Chinese people. And the island of Taiwan was taken over by and colonized by Japan after the naval war in 1894. And then, it continued to be, less able to be reunited with mainland China for the past decades. So that has been, kept on the mind of Chinese people, that it speaks about colonialism and imperialism. It speaks about the Chinese history of being humiliated by foreign power in the past 150 years. But that hope and that dream of reunification has never ceded. It has always been on the mind of Chinese people. And I think, it is the hope of the Communist Party of China, and it is the hope of Chinese people to eventually reunify with the Taiwan. And also, like President Xi mentioned in his speech, the Chinese people upheld this culture and norm of unification and unity. It's in our blood, kind of. Eventually, I think with the prosperity and development and rejuvenation in mainland China, there will be more opportunities for the two sides to eventually reunify.
Professor, we are grateful for your analysis and your explanations. Thank you so much for coming in today.
Thank you.
And we also asked some young people in Beijing what the revolution means to them and what progress China has made.
第一个是爱国，这是毋庸置疑的。他还有一个牺牲精神，为了大众的一个利益而牺牲小我的那种大无畏的精神。
首先要爱国，并且就是把人民放在首位，勇于追求自由、民主、平等的这样一些精神。
爱国，然后敢为人先，不甘落后，然后勇于进步，不怕流血，不怕牺牲。
我们青年人，应该以史为鉴，要大力弘扬，这种敢为人先的精神。
其实国家变强的感受是一个循序渐进的过程。 从我们千禧年初那会儿的韬光养晦政策，到现在的我国敢为一切不平等或者说不公平的事情勇敢地站出来发声，这就是一个我国富强民主的一个象征。
我觉得印象最深的是，前几天的孟晚舟女士的成功回国的那个事件。从这个事件中，我也感受到，弱国无外交，正是因为中国强大了，才会有孟晚舟女士的平安回国。我也是深深的为祖国的强大而自豪。
This is Global Watch on CGTN when we come back after a short break.